Just admit it. You expected your guests to act like you. You expected cleaners to be professional, contractors to be honest, and hot tubs to just work right. Now you've realized it's not all sunshine and 5-star reviews. That means you're in the right place. This is the community where we talk about the gross, awkward, and the operational messes, as well as the real-world strategies that help you keep going instead of quitting, because you are not a quitter, and this industry is somewhere where you can win. Welcome to STR Problems, Strong Solutions. Let's get into today's question. So we've actually got a kind of trashy topic today. Sorry, I couldn't avoid the pun. Let me just get into it. So hi, Jeremiah. Love the show and can't wait to see where it goes. I manage my own Airbnb in the mountains, and my neighbor keeps complaining about the garbage getting knocked over and spread around by the bears. This is becoming a real problem since it takes me 2 hours to drive there, and attempts to find someone to clean it up have been unsuccessful. What ideas do you have so this stops happening? Thanks, Sharif. So this is really, really common in mountain areas, especially like the Smoky Mountains, where black bears are like part of the reason why people come. So you've got the pros, you've got the cons, you've got animals there, and people want to enjoy the animals, but what do you do with the garbage? And so this is one of those things that people tend to not think about before they buy in mountain markets, especially the most rural ones. It's just it's a logistics thing. That's really all it is. And you've got to figure it out just like any other logistics problem. So we're going to dive into this. But the first thing we need to consider is the guest experience. Now, where are these guests coming from? If it's a mountain market, they're usually coming from cities or suburbs. If they're coming from farms, I don't know why they're coming to the mountains. They're already in a rural area. But most of your guests are coming from a place where what they're used to doing is just putting their trash in a can, so that way it doesn't stink up the house, and on trash day, taking that can down to the curb. And if that is what they're used to doing, then that's what we can expect them reasonably to do, with maybe a couple small modifications. Now, we have to consider what the guest is going to consider reasonable and what the guest is not going to consider reasonable, because you could just ask them to take it to a refuse facility, but that might be, 10, 20, 30 minutes down the road. They might have to put all that trash in their own car. They might be driving like a little Honda Civic. There's not enough space next to the sheets. And I say sheets. Most rentals today include linens, but some don't. So that's actually a dig at a couple property owners that I know of who manage homes that don't include sheets. That's a totally different topic. Hopefully somebody writes in about that one, because I'd love to go off on it. In fact, I've got a TikTok that went viral on galvanized investments. We have got like 21,000 views, but it's about that topic. Anyway, getting back on topic, when we're talking about this trash situation, remember your guests are ignorant. They have not lived in the mountains. They don't know what it takes to protect the trash from the bear. And they don't realize how much of an effect it's going to have on the neighbors, on you, on everything that goes on. So you have to think about that. And in the guest experience then has to be used and prioritized when you're talking about the trash collection practices in a rural area. So up here in the Poconos, I can say we've got like 5 or 6 different trash collection options. We could go with Whitetail. We could go with County Waste, which is now another company, but that's beside the point. We can go with Waste Management and a few others. Right. So all these trash haulers are doing essentially the same thing. They're just driving a truck around on a route and then taking it down to the dump, which is in Penn Argyl, which is like a 40-minute drive for me. So they'll rent their dumpsters and they'll do all kinds of things, but they charge you by how often it gets picked up. So sometimes it's getting picked up weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, sometimes once a month. They will rent the cans to you. Almost every single one of these services requires that your trash cans be at the curb. Some of them, and this is sometimes community specific, because sometimes communities, they benefit from the collective of a large contract to negotiate with the trash haulers to get everybody's rates lower. So some communities have rules in place that, your cans have to be brought down on Monday. They have to be brought back up by the beginning of the day Wednesday. People start getting $100 fines for noncompliance. There's all kinds of things that go on around here, and your guests are not aware of what those rules and regulations are. They're just used to Well, the trash should be going out every week. Why is it not every week? And truth is, because if the homeowner's paying for it out of their pocket every single month, then they could save a little money. You could save a little money by going every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, or by having a completely different service that is not on like a weekly schedule, right? So there are services out here that will, on demand, go and pick up your trash. Some of them are even willing to go into your shed or to go into your garage, a place that's secure. And we're going to actually get into that soon. But those are defined. And as you can expect, for that little extra level of service, they're a little more expensive as well. So your guests are most likely willing to put their trash in a can. And within reason, it can be in some place that's very secure. But they're not familiar with bare cans or bare boxes. They don't know how to use these things. Putting that guest experience first is important because there might be some training involved. Next, the solution that we come up with has to be something that's reliable and sustainable. It shouldn't involve you driving long distances because that's not going to be sustainable. You're going to get tired of doing that over time, and you're probably going to give up on the industry as a whole just because of your trash situation. Don't want that. There's got to be a reliability to the service provider. So if you found somebody who, just got into business, you've got to recognize that they might not be all that reliable. They haven't been doing this very long. They haven't had the opportunity to prove their consistency. It's not a reason to not give them a shot, but is it a long-term solution? We don't know yet. And then for the product, whatever you use to protect your trash, you've got to make sure that it's something that's going to work and it's going to last a while. So what is strong enough for a bear? Well, what works in my experience, I'm going to go over a short list here. But remember that for these solutions to work, they have to be something that the bear can't figure out, but your guest can figure out. So there's this like overlapping Venn diagram of what your guest can figure out and what the bear can't figure out. And in order to make that overlap a little bigger, I recommend making instructional videos. Now, you can upload these to YouTube, a regular platform where people can find stuff, and you don't have to make it listed. You're not going to get comments on it. If it's only unlisted, then you're not sharing these videos with the general population. You're only sharing it with people who have the link, which means that you can add it into your welcome guide. You can send the link through Airbnb. You probably can't send it through VRBO because VRBO likes to block things like that. But you can have it like as a QR code on your trash can or on your shed. You can do things like that. And that's just a good practice in order to make more things that the guest can figure out that the bear can't figure out. Obviously, the bear's not scanning the QR code and watching the instructional video on how to open the can. So anyway, getting into it, my favorite is the bear-proof trash cans. Now, these are expensive, but they're certainly worth it. I've personally lived in a in a mountain market for 2008 until 2026 is a long time. So I've lived in a bear market for a long time, and I've had my share of trash being pulled apart by the animals. And I can say that the best product that I've ever purchased was a used bear-proof trash can. It has a metal rim around the outside. It's got a special latching mechanism. It works for some automated trash haulers, but there aren't any of those automated trash haulers out here that I'm aware of. This can has never been broken into by a bear, and it's been knocked over many times. There's tooth marks all over it. It's very hard and thick plastic. Now, I'm not dealing with grizzly bears, and I'm not dealing with smart black bears. These are smart, relatively smart bears, right? But they haven't figured out how to get into my bear-proof can yet. So I can say with enthusiasm, I've never found one of these cans broken into that was properly latched. I have found the latching mechanisms that fail over time with, they just need some loops usually. But I found that to be the case, but they do have a learning curve. The can comes with a sticker. You can find these at Ace Hardware. They're around $400. Again, I have not found them on Amazon, but if I can find them, I'll leave a link in the description. The bear-proof trash can, you might also be able to find at Home Depot. There's two different types. There's one where you squeeze, and there's one where you stick your finger in a metal tube and you latch it, unlatch it. Anyway, back to the point. So I've never found this to be caught. Now, the problem with it is they are expensive, and they can get filled up pretty quickly because of the capacity. So in order to have enough capacity for a 5-bedroom house, you might need to have 3 of these cans, and your trash hauler has to be willing to open them. I think usually they are. I know mine is. They open it every single week. And what I do personally is I separate the edible trash from the inedible trash. That way I can use just one can. But your guests, again, going back to that guest experience, they're not going to want to do that. They're going to want to put all their trash and recyclables sometimes into one bag and then put that somewhere. The other thing to consider is that your guests are also going to want to have recyclables separate. So you should have at least 2 cans so that you can give them the illusion that you're actually recycling. Even though the trash haulers in rural areas throw everything in the same place, they generally do not recycle. Sorry to say. I'm all for like saving the environment, but you've got to have service providers that do that too. So anyway, bear-resistant dumpsters are also quite effective if they're used correctly. So that also requires a great deal of education. I can say that at our multifamily apartment buildings that we manage, nobody seems to be willing to use them the right way, which means latching them correctly so that they actually stay locked. At my office, we have a staff of 22 and we use a bear-proof dumpster and it actually works because everybody latches it afterwards. I've seen bear prints all over that thing. I know it's trying to get in and it can't, which is a wonderful thing. There are some people who have trouble figuring it out, but the biggest issue is actually getting people to lock it up afterwards because they think that the handle that they're touching is gross. Because it's part of a trash can, they don't want to interact with it any more than necessary. And these things have to be greased in order to slide. And anyway, back to the point. The problem with a short-term rental having a dumpster is the aesthetics. It just doesn't look good to be pulling into a cabin and out front there's this like 2 or 3 yard trash container that's just massive. So there's a problem with that. And also I spend around $400 a month for biweekly pickup of my small bear-proof trash dumpster. So that's a lot of money, relatively speaking, compared to other trash hauling options. But it might be a good option to consider, especially if you or guests are creating a lot of trash. Also, that fee would go down to probably $300 a month if I was only getting it picked up once a month. So, that's another thing to consider. A bear box. These are these are very common, but I don't mean a bear box made out of wood. I made a bear box made out of steel. Now, these are very expensive. It's like buying the dumpster yourself, but you can put regular cans into it. There's a locking mechanism. Again, there's a learning curve for this, but you can overcome that. They are user-friendly, but there are multiple options on the market. You just got to find one that your guests will be okay with. Now, if it's done right, it's not one that a bear will get into. I've seen them at public parks, at state parks, and things like that. Generally don't see them at short-term rentals, but you could do it. It might be fairly difficult to find one on the like secondary market, like maybe something that's used. Just like anything, they have to be used right in order to be effective. And in my experience, the bear is not able to figure out how to get into these. And if they're made out of hard steel and they're pretty solid, then you should be fine. But that's better looking than a dumpster. So that's the idea there. Another one is an attached garage. Normally, in my experience, bears don't try to break into a house, regardless of how good it smells. They are non-confrontational. They're not trying to get to your bacon because it's inside your kitchen. They can smell it for sure. And they might sniff around your backyard or towards your windows, but they're not going to break into your house. Now, if it's an attached garage, they see it as part of the house. They'll probably not break in. Now, if you leave the garage door open, all right, you're inviting tragedy. Don't do that, just because now the bear's going to think it can go through garage doors and other places as well. Sorry, don't leave your garage door open if you're going to store trash in there, because the bear might wander in and realize that garages have some delicious food. So I don't know how we got onto that. But normally they won't break into an attached garage. The problem with putting it in a garage is that your trash collectors will not pick it up from your garage. Now, there might be a service out there that will. In our area, there's like one that might do it as like a customized service, but to reliably get that trash from your garage to the curb is actually the problem. It's what we have to kind of overcome and figure out. The other problem is now you can't use your garage for other things, like turning it into a game room or allowing the guests to use it for their cars. So there's pros and cons to that approach, but it is relatively secure while it's in there. And if the guests are taking it down to the curb on a Monday, or if the cleaners are there on a Monday and they're taking it down, you might be just fine, but now you got to get somebody to bring it back. Whereas the other 3 options are all being kept at the curb for the most part, absent of any like community regulations to the otherwise. Like you have to bring your cans back up. So the attached garage is an option. Reinforced shed. Notice I did not say shed. It has to be reinforced. So a wood paneled shed is not strong enough. This goes for a detached garage as well, but usually the bigger the structure, the less likely the bear is to break into it. But a wood paneled shed is not strong enough. I've seen bears pull T111 siding off of the building in order to get in, or scratch until they can get a hole. Sometimes those holes are made by chipmunks or squirrels or whatever else that's going in there, which will gnaw through a little bit. But then once the bear smells it, it's like, all right, well, let me just pull this back. And they get it off and they pull the trash can out. So it's not secure if it's not reinforced. Could you reinforce it with 2x4s? Yeah. Anything you do is going to help for sure. But you've got to think about all these things together. And I do manage a property with a camera right on it. And I also posted a TikTok of a bear breaking into that. It took the double doors on the shed and it just swung back and forth until the latches literally broke out. They were like 1-inch screws and it just kept on pulling until it was free. And that all happened at like 2 a.m. So unless it's reinforced, and that shed was, that door had 3 locks. It didn't have just one because it had already been broken into. It had 3 locks, which were pretty secure, but without through bolts and everything, like the bear was bold enough to just rip it open. The other issue with your shed and leaving it in there is that trash collectors still won't pick it up. So if you're holding it in a shed or if you're holding it in your garage, the problem is it's still going to be at the curb for trash day, which means it could be torn apart while it's at the curb. Now you're reducing the exposure time where it could be torn apart, but like I said, bears are creatures of habit. So they're smart enough to figure out, oh, everybody's got their trash out today. Let me go down the street and figure out which ones have stuff I want to eat. And it could be, a half-used mayo jar. It could be some rotten chicken. It could be ice cream. They really, really like ice cream. So they smell it and I don't know what it is, but like when I pick up trash that's been torn apart by an animal, by a bear specifically, it's always those couple of things. It's like, animal fats, ice cream, and mayo, like things that have a decent amount of fat in them. Another weird fact, I found bears actually break into septic tanks because of the amount of grease that's in the septic system. They can smell it. And if the lid is right there, they can actually just pull the lid right off and scoop up some of that grease. You probably think that's as gross as I think it is, and it really is. But that's the mindset of a bear. Okay? They're not like you and I. They smell something that's rich in fats and it's going to give them a lot of calories, and they don't care that it's mixed with, you know, moving on. So here are some things that do not work. Okay, I can tell you definitively they don't work. And inevitably, short-term rental owners always try these first. So let's talk about them. Any shed that is not reinforced will not work. It might work for a little while, but when the bear gets hungry or when something smells particularly good, they're going to get in. Secondly, trash cans with ratchet straps. Now, this is a terrible idea because the trash hauler is not going to want to take the ratchet straps off. But even if they are, the ratchet straps are not going to stop the bear. This is a cheap little, like $200 trash can sometimes. And the ratchet straps are able to be cut through just with a bite. So don't even try it. And the same thing goes for bungee cords. That'll keep some animals out, like maybe raccoons or cats. And we do have a lot of feral cats in the woods, but it won't keep out the bear. That's for sure. Dumpsters without locking doors. So they kind of identify in their community near where they den where the closest dumpsters are because that's the easiest source of nutrients. So like, you got to put yourself in the mindset of the bear. Like they could forage all day and find blueberries and maybe some fish or some roadkill. They could find these things and it'll get them in a day, maybe 5,000 calories. Or they could go to like 2 trash cans and get 5,000 calories. And they'd save all that walking on their, little paws. So they're just foraging. They're looking for berries and fruits and bugs and grubs and whatever else. But like the trash is so delicious and it's so easy to find that that's where they go. Another thing that doesn't work is telling guests to put the trash in their car and take it to the dumpster or to take it home. Like that is completely unreasonable to a guest. And if you are guest focused and focused on the guest experience and trying to get like 5 stars, you should never do this. I know that there's a lot of communities in the mountains that have central dumpster locations, and it's a great practice. It really is. The problem is expecting your guests to just do this is completely unreasonable to them. What I do is a hybrid. So I've got a bear-proof trash can, but because it doesn't get collected at the curb, this is at my investment properties. So because it doesn't get collected at the curb, it still has to be taken to a community dumpster. I just have my crew take it from there to the community dumpster whenever the guest doesn't do it. I asked the guest if they are willing to take the trash to the community dumpster. That lessens the load on us, and my crew appreciates that. But at the end of the day, if they feel like that's unreasonable to put it in there, or if they just are running out of time, I still want them to be able to check out and know that they're not being demonized, they're not being charged, that it's a courtesy for them to take the trash from the house and put it in the community dumpster. And in this situation, the community dumpster is, well, in one situation, it's a minute right around the block. Another situation, it is 3 blocks away. And another situation, it's like a 2 or 3 minute drive. So in all of these scenarios, it's not like it's far. And it's not like it's that far out of their way that they can't stop after checkout. And not only that, the dumpster is always open in all of those scenarios. So if a guest has to leave at like 11 p.m. or like 6 a.m. in the morning, the dumpster is open where they can actually drop off their trash. If the guest doesn't want to put it in their car, they don't have space, they think it's gross, the bag ripped, whatever, I'm completely fine with them putting it in the trash can. That's what I told them to do, and that's what it's there for. Additionally, my trash cans are there so that the guests don't have to keep the trash in the house where it's secure, and they don't have to take it to the dumpster throughout their stay. But it is something that we address with them because there is that learning curve. We want to make sure they know how to open it and close it so that it's secure. And numerous times I found those cans knocked over, the bears trying to get in. They were brand new when I got them there. There's now plenty of toothprints throughout the can because they've been tried and they've never been broken into, fortunately. So anyway, that doesn't work. Telling guests to put the trash in their car is just not going to work out for you. Do not do it, but you can request that they do it. Just don't make it part of your house rules. They don't think that's reasonable, and it doesn't help with the reviews either. The next one is, I would say, quite controversial. A bear box that's made of wood, it's not going to be strong enough. I'm sorry. It's just wood. Remember, I just told you the T111 siding was torn out of its screws off the shell of this shed in order for the bear to get to it. I've seen numerous times where various types of bear boxes that are reinforced but all in wood, not in steel, are just torn apart. They're knocked over, they're flipped over, they're all kinds of things. I've seen a bear box that is so big and heavy that a person can't pick it up, and a bear had knocked it over. It's unthinkable in some situations, but there's plenty of people, I want to say, peddling their bear box solutions. They are not bear proof. I can say with experience, they're not, because I've cleaned up trash from them and they look good. They don't smell good, but they stay at the curb, and your trash haulers are usually willing to open up those doors. The bears can't open up those doors, but a couple things happen. The guests don't close the doors right, or the bear breaks into it anyway. I've seen 2x4s ripped out with 3-inch screws in them because the bear wanted to get to the trash. And it did. Spoiler alert, they don't work. But the bear box that I would use is one to just keep the cans upright because it's better than nothing. Also, the bear box that we're talking about that's made out of wood is better than nothing. The shed that's not reinforced is better than nothing. So it's better than doing nothing, and it's going to reduce the frequency of these things happening. But if you're going to solve this problem, I don't recommend trying things that aren't going to work. I just recommend going right to the one thing that will work for sure. And lastly, the bear box that's going to help to keep the cans like upright. I use bear-proof trash cans and a box that's going to keep them upright. So one can go in the other. The cans never get taken out of that box. So it's not like they're too heavy for the trash hauler. They usually just open up the lid, take the bags out, which is another reason why your bags and your rules, your house rules, should say that everything in the trash should be in the bag. There shouldn't be any loose products in there. I see this constantly with like boxes of like alcoholic containers where they've got all the recycling in one thing and they're thinking that they're going to drop it in the recycling, and it's supposed to be loose in those situations. But the recyclers come, and if it's not in a bag, they're not taking it. So that creates other problems. But usually with the recyclables, the bear is not trying to get into it unless, like I said, it's like a mayo jar. Anyway, so now that we know what works and what doesn't work, another recommendation I've got for you is make sure that there's a camera that can view your trash cans. You should be able to see those trash cans at all times. And because this is such a problem, you need to be aware of it before your neighbors become aware of it. Because if your neighbors become aware of it before you do, that creates friction. If you create a problem or an impression with enough of your neighbors, they will take your rights away. And now, this is not necessarily true in every market, but it's certainly true in Pennsylvania, where short-term rentals are allowed or not allowed by the township, because townships are politics that generally nobody pays attention to until it impacts them. And guess what? As a short-term rental owner, unless you live in that township, you don't get a voice. It's taxation without representation. It's regulation without representation. You don't get a vote because you don't live there. You don't get a vote. The people who do live there, I would say, stay on their good side. Share coffee and cookies with them when you see them. Be nice, be friendly. Don't come across as greedy. We could have a whole nother topic talking about community relations. And I think I'll put a blog out this week about it at jeremiahknoll.com. Anyhow, what you have to remember is that your relationship with your neighbors can make or break your operation. I saw a neighbor that was just creepy, and I hope he hears this podcast because I don't have the guts to tell him directly. But he put like a tea set on top of his septic mound, which is the closest part of his property to the hot tub next door. And he actually sits out there drinking tea, talking on the phone, as close as possible to the people who are bathing in the hot tub at my rental property. It's so creepy. Stop it. But if you have good relationships with your neighbors, you can approach a conversation like that, right? Every relationship benefits from confrontation at some level. So that's my own failure that I haven't spoken to the guy yet, but he just seems so creepy. I think it's so weird that he's like deciding to go out and have coffee in that one part of his yard. And by the way, there's no fences allowed in this community. So we actually built a fence out of firewood. Anyway, getting back to the point, we're talking about trash. Dealing with your neighbor, have some sympathy. Make sure that they know you've got a camera on it so that they don't have to remind you all the time, but you are welcome to the reminder. That way you can get your team in action to start taking care of some things whenever there's an issue. Ask them about local services. There might be a trash hauler that they use that they trust for this purpose. They're also used to dealing with a bear as well. So they might be able to give you some useful tips and tricks as well. They probably just found one solution and have been dealing with it ever since. Or they pick up their trash every time it gets torn apart. A lot of people don't give this as much thought as I do. But being a property manager in the mountain region, I'm dealing with this constantly. So I give it a lot of thought, especially when I'm picking up trash. Because what else are you going to think about? Like, all right, well, how do I keep this from happening again? I'm just going to have to I start looking at and analyzing, like, what are the trends? Like, why do I think that the bear tore this one apart? Goodness. Anyway, I guess if you're in like a beach market, you've got the same issue with seagulls, but those are probably a little bit easier to fend off, balloons and such. But be nice to your neighbors. They might also be willing to clean that up for you. Just ask them what they think would be reasonable. If they say, oh, like probably $20, it really helps me out as much as it helps you out. If they say, I'd do it, but it'd be like $200, like that's an issue. Now you know that you just don't have a good enough relationship with those guys, and you might not have wanted to ask that question without a relationship. But nevertheless, make sure that you maintain your relationship with your neighbor. They're the ones who are primarily affected by this problem, and they're the ones who are dealing with most of the negatives of you being a vacation rental. So you want to make sure that they see the positives as well. Next, ask your cleaners. Find out what they're willing to do. I've actually had cleaners on my crew that were not willing to pick up trash. Believe that or not, not everybody's humble enough to do this. And it really takes a person with a good heart to be willing to do whatever it takes, or somebody who's motivated. Now, what usually motivates people? Money, right? So if you're paying them, I don't know, $50 an hour, they might not want to do it. But if you're paying them $100 an hour, maybe they will. You get the idea. And maybe you're only paying them $10 an hour. I don't know. That's between you and them. But whatever they're getting for it, you can increase their motivation to do it and their willingness to do it. And if you can find out if your cleaners are willing to handle this, just make sure you ask them, how much extra do you want for it? Because they're providing an additional service for you. There has to be a fee. And it's awkward for most cleaners to tell you what that fee is unless you bring it up. Okay, so make sure you ask other hosts. Try to network with other hosts in your marketplace. Think of collaboration, not competition. It's not like there's a fixed number of people who are going to come to, Pennsylvania this year. More people will come to Pennsylvania if there's more positive guest experiences in Pennsylvania. It'll attract more business. And so it's like a rising tide lifts all ships. And I believe that in our industry, everybody can benefit as a whole. So collaborate with other hosts, work with them. You're not offering the same property, so you're not really in competition directly. But find out what they're using. Consider a cleaning service that's humble enough to pick up trash if your cleaners won't do it. So many cleaners are not real cleaners. And this bothers me. So I'm going to get a little bit off topic again. But like short-term rental cleaners are going into a relatively clean house that was just cleaned earlier in the week, and they're cleaning it. It's already pretty clean. Usually the houses aren't trashed. Even if they are, your cleaners are usually not having to do like deep level cleaning. They're not scrubbing grease out of carpets and blood stains. Sometimes they are, but like that's not real cleaning. If you don't know like the special concoction that's going to cause everything to come out of laundry, then you're just an average cleaner. You're just running everything through with Tide or Gain or All or Arm & Hammer or whatever you prefer, washing things down with Fabuloso, mopping, sweeping, vacuuming, the things that are necessary to turn a rental, perfectly good. But a lot of short-term rental cleaners are not like deep cleaners. They don't have any humility. They want to like, make it look artsy with their swan folding of the towels and everything. And that's great. Those are good cleaners, but they're not really somebody who's going to be willing to pick up trash. They think they're above that. So consider finding a cleaning service that will actually take care of those things, and make sure that you offer to pay for it, because this is a service that they're providing and it's saving you money. And it should be, again, sustainable long term. Also, figure out how it's going to be charged. So, property that we took over when it was sold, we took over for management, I should say, the cleaner was charging $300 a month. And that was to take the cans out on Mondays and bring them back on Tuesdays. And they were maintaining the hot tub. So they were there for more than just one thing, but it was the cleaning service that was cleaning the house. Now, the reason she was charging monthly and not just adding something per basis was because this is an ongoing thing. If you're going to be maintaining the hot tub and taking out the trash cans, that's going to happen every single week, every single month, and it should be treated that way. So it's good to think about that kind of a hybrid payment situation. Like the $300 a month, I think, was a little bit high for what she was doing, but hey, 4 visits a month, 4.5, 5, that adds up. It's like maybe $60 per visit. And the cleaners think that their time is worth like $75, $100 an hour because of how quickly they run through your house sometimes. So you got to take everything into consideration here. But your cleaner is another person who might be able to help out with this. Just don't expect that they're going to be the only one who's willing to help out. There are other services out there. There's contractors who will make this part of their monthly time frame. Another thing to consider is networking with contractors that are already in your town and seeing if you can collectively get a few other short-term rentals together and everybody pays them a set monthly rate to provide this additional service. And it might be taking the cans out of your garage and putting them down at the curb. It might be taking them out of the shed and putting them down at the curb. It's just a personalized level of service. But if you can get them to do that for everybody, like so that every Tuesday they're going around and just doing all this stuff and they make an extra, I don't know, $1,000 a month, then you're going to benefit from the economy of scale, which makes you a lot like a property manager. Lastly, what's your budget? So you've got to think about that and if it's actually worth it or if it's not actually worth it. So if you've listened all the way to this point, thank you for listening in on this trashy garbage topic. But if you're in a mountain market, if you're in a rural area, you probably recognize how important this is. And especially if you're in an HOA or a township that can regulate you out of existence, you also understand how big the implications are and how important it is to get this right. And if today's episode felt a little too familiar, you're not alone. These are the problems no one talks about when they sell the dream of easy passive income, but they're exactly the problems that make or break your operation. Email your question or reach out if you'd be willing to call into the show. Your problem might be the next one that we break down, and chances are You'll help a lot of other hosts in the process too. If this episode helped you, share it with another host who's in the trenches. That's how we make the industry better. I'd also love to see you follow us on TikTok at Galvanized Investments, Facebook and YouTube at Galvanized Management, and lastly, my blog at jeremiahknoll.com. Also, you can email me anytime, all your questions at info@galvanizedmanagement.com. So until next time, stay steady, keep learning, and keep building something real. This is STR Problems, Strong Solutions.